Hey. All right, gang. Today is day 20 of Press Record 30. Talking about Blaise Pascal, the philosopher, specifically um, the French means thoughts. I actually don't know how you pronounce it. Um, but it's Blaise Pascal's French mathematician and philosopher around the 16th century. Um, Quotes and sayings that we now know and kind of are held in popular conscience. I think probably the most is all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit in a room alone. There's a case to be made that he is the father of existentialism, him and Kierkegaard, because much of what about is this contemplation of the vastness of the universe and our tininess as a being of the universe, and it is a grappling with and a searching for how do we as human beings find a way in the world. There are two specific passages in Pascal that I want to talk about. The first is this concept of thrownness. Thrownness referring to the idea that we are thrown period for seemingly arbitrary reasons, asked to figure out this thing called life, come to a period where we're starting to get some, what we think is some grip of it, our lives end. So we're alive barely begin to get oriented in this world that we're thrown into. And he describes this experience and mystery and disorientation of our spirit as what I call Pascal's work that I want to talk about is what's called Pascal's wager. I'm not going to call it a proof for God's existence because it's not exactly a proof. We'll talk more about this when we get to it. To a culture in France that is familiar with gambling. And so they would have been familiar with Aquinas' proof. And Pascal is approaching in sort of an apologist manner. How do you get to believe based on reason? How do you maybe tip the scales in favor of them finding that God? So the first thing I want to talk about is I want to talk about and address this idea of. So if we go into one other word, I guess, just on the thoughts, 1,000 aphorisms, the Pensées. It's a collection of about 1,000 aphorisms, and the reason is to be a coherent, clear, and ordered book of apologetics, but he died before he was able to make that happen. Highly of Pascal maintained that manuscript on his death, and they made copies of it. To us is this book, which is just a collection of his thoughts. Consider it something like his notes that he was eventually going to organize and put. So this is what we get. So there are a number of just aphorisms, seemingly order as they appear in the book, but with the intention that they would have eventually been organized. 68. When I considered the brief span of my life, absorbed into the eternity which comes as the remembrance of a guest that tarrieth but a day, the small space I occupy, infinite immensity of spaces of which I know nothing and which know nothing of me. I take to see myself here rather than there. There is no reason for me to be here rather than there. Who put me here? By whose command and act were this time and place allotted? This is Pascal's idea of thrownness. And this sort of explains and foreshadows what we think of now, or what has come to be known, sort of the idea of the absurd, that we are these beings thrown into a universe that can contemplate the entire universe, which makes us unique among beings and animals, a mind to contemplate the entire universe, but without the ability or self to sort of discernibly find the meaning of the universe in a way that is provable of human existence. Pascal would call this wretchedness. A few lines after the thronist aphorism: condition we're truly happy, we should not need to divert ourselves from thinking about it. This sort of Pascal quote of man's problems stem from his inability to sit in a room alone. There is this idea of we would not need to find ways to busy ourselves and distract ourselves from just sitting and contemplating. This is probably, thrownness also reminds me of a lot of what Marcus Aurelius writes about. To Pascal, that connects him with thinkers like Marcus Aurelius, and even in some of the same concepts. Now, what I want to talk about next is the idea of Pascal's wager. It also it comes later in the book, but Pascal's wager, his answer to a community, a society, a particular people, as becoming increasingly skeptical of God's existence, and particularly them not one or another, and sort of living these lukewarm spiritual lives. As skepticism comes in, they're not really, and so they kind of just go about it, not really taking a stance one way or another. So this is specifically who Pascal is talking to when he writes of the Pensées. This thought, you could call it. Let us examine God is or he is not, but to which view shall we be inclined? Reason cannot decide this question. At the far end of this infinite distance, a coin is being spun, which will come down. Will you wager? Reason cannot make you choose either. Reason cannot prove either wrong. This is how reason can't tell us that God exists, and he can't tell us with certainty that he doesn't exist. Kierkegaard would later say that this is what's required by the leap of faith. Once we've gone as far as reason can take us, we have to take the leap of faith beyond where reason can take us. Pascal is talking about something similar here. So he says, wrong. Do not then condemn as wrong those who have made a choice, for you know nothing about it. Not for having made this particular choice, but any choice. For although the one who calls heeds and the other one are equally at fault, the fact is that they both are at fault. The right thing is to not wager at all. Interlocutor or the people that are responding to his statement that you have to choose, that people should make any choice at all. Why not just opt out? So Pascal, yes, but you must wager. There is no choice. You are already committed. And what he's saying here is we're already choose. We were born. And by being born, we are forced to make a choice between whether we think God exists or doesn't exist. Not to make a choice, we are making a choice in the direction of non-existence. Since a choice must be made, let us see which offers you the least interest. So here is where Pascal's probabilistic argument for the existence of God, known as Pascal's wager. And what he's going to make here is a case that and what you have to lose it makes more sense rationally because you have infinity to gain and very little to lose. Here's what he says specifically. You have two things to lose: the true and the good, and two things at stake: your reason and your will, your knowledge and your happiness. And your nature has two things. Since you must necessarily choose, your reason is no more affronted by choosing one rather than the other. Happiness, let us weigh up the gain and the loss involved in calling heads that God exists. Let us assess the two cases. Win everything. Meaning, if you bet on God existing and live that way, you win everything. If you lose, if you bet on God existing and he doesn't, you lose nothing, or at least very little. Do not that he does exist. That is wonderful. Yes, I must wager, but perhaps I am wagering too much. This is what Pascal's response. Let us see. Since there is an equal chance of gain and loss, if you stood to win only 2 lives for 1, supposing you stood to win 3, you would have to play, since you must necessarily play, and if it would be unwise to play not to risk your life in order to win 3 lives at a game in which there is an equal chance of losing and winning. That being so, even though there were an infinite number of chances, of which only one were in your favor, you would win 2, and you would be acting wrongly, being obliged to play, and refusing to take 1 life against 3 in a game. Chances there is 1 in your favor if there were an infinity of infinitely happy life to be won, but here there is there is an infinity of infinitely happy life to be won. 1 chance of losing, and what you are staking is finite. That leaves no choice. Wherever there is infinity, losing against that of winning, there is no room for hesitation. You must give everything, and thus must be renouncing reason if you hoard your life rather than risk it for an infinite gain, just as likely to occur to nothing. That is Pascal's wager. There are a number of against it. There are a number of questions it raises, including the fact that Pascal is making a lot of assumptions. The nature of eternity when he says that you have infinity to gain. There's also the question of which you believe in. Is it the God of the Buddhists or the Muslims or what about the Christians and the Jews? Do you have to also believe in Jesus to obtain this infinity? Nuances to Pascal's wager that are not addressed by Pascal specifically, but I introduced this something to ponder and think about as you assess and weigh what you believe. This is not meant to be a proof. Like I said earlier, it is just meant to think, as Pascal would say, the salvation and existence of the immortality of the soul most important, which means it deserves the best and most thoughtful of our attention. That's enough. Peace.